This week, it's a tough one. We're diving into a story that's, well, it's both shocking and, sadly, kind of feels like something we hear too often these days. You know, the kind of news that makes you just stop and really wonder how this could even happen, especially in a place like Whitesburg, Kentucky.
Right.
We're talking about Judge Kevin Mullins.
Yes.
Fatally shot.
Yes.
And inside the Letcher County Courthouse of all places.
Inside the courthouse.
And the person who pulled the trigger, well, it was Sheriff Stines, the very person you'd think would be, you know, upholding the law.
Yeah, the irony is really hard-hitting in this one. I mean, it really does make you question, like you were saying, how these things can even happen. These are supposed to be the people that make us feel safe.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And in a place like Whitesburg, a small town where everybody knows everybody, it really hits home. So today we're going to try to untangle this whole thing.
Yeah.
We've got articles piled up here, national newspapers, local stuff from the Mountain Eagle, even some court documents we managed to dig up.
Wow.
Our goal is to, well, basically try to paint a clearer picture of this whole tragic event and how it's rippled through this Appalachian community.
I think it's so important to look at the wider context here, too, you know. This case, it really forces us to think about violence within the very systems that are, well, meant to keep things in check.
Exactly. So before we get into what happened that day, let's talk about the people at the center of it all. Judge Kevin Mullins, from what we're gathering, he was more than just a judge, you know, wearing the robes and all that.
Right.
He was really involved in something that's become a big issue in Letcher County, substance abuse recovery programs.
Which is particularly relevant when you consider the opioid crisis, right? Appalachia has been hit hard. So this wasn't just a judge handing down sentences. It sounds like he was really invested in tackling this really painful issue that's affected so many in that community.
Absolutely. There's this quote from the Mountain Eagle. This really gets to the heart of it. It says, Judge Mullins was known for pushing for treatment over locking people up, especially for those battling addiction.
Wow. So he really wanted to help people break free from that cycle. That's a very different approach.
Yeah, it seems like he wanted to give people a real shot at turning their lives around. And the community, well, they clearly saw that in him.
Yeah.
We're seeing it now in how much they're grieving. But even before, people saying he truly listened, that he genuinely cared. Those aren't just words people throw around. It shows how much he meant to the community.
It really does.
Which makes what Sheriff Stines did even harder to understand.
Yeah.
You know, and this is where it gets kind of strange, almost ironic. Before he was sheriff, Stines was actually a bailiff.
Oh, wow.
You know, the officer in the courtroom, making sure there's order. And he was doing that in Judge Mullins' courtroom.
It's almost like something out of a play, you know? The one who's supposed to protect becomes, well, the one who harms. Makes you wonder what was going on, what led to this.
It's a huge question in the investigation, for sure. And there's another thing. Just a few days before the shooting, Sheriff Stines, he was being deposed for a lawsuit against him.
Okay, so for those who don't know, a deposition is basically like a formal interview. Everything's on the record, under oath, for a lawsuit.
Right.
And in this case, it was about Stines allegedly not training a deputy properly, who was then accused of sexual misconduct. Now, we don't want to get bogged down in legal details, but it's something to keep in mind as we look at everything that happened.
You're right. It's a detail that's hard to ignore, even though the investigation's still going on. But we should mention, Sheriff Stines, he was also really dedicated to his community. Back in 2019, he was very outspoken about the damage the meth epidemic was doing to the county. What he said back then really showed how much he cared about protecting the people there.
It just goes to show the complexities of law enforcement. They're constantly dealing with these heavy situations, their responsibility, the pressure. It has to take a toll. It's a heavy weight to carry, no doubt. And it's in that space, somewhere between doing your duty and facing such despair day in and day out, that this tragedy unfolds. It's a stark reminder that even those folks, you know, the ones we look to for protection, they're dealing with their own battles inside.
So you've got Judge Mullins, the one fighting for those struggling with addiction, trying to put their lives back together. And then you have Sheriff Stines carrying the weight of his whole community on his shoulders. And then, bam, on that day, their paths cross in the most tragic way possible.
It's a chilling series of events when you break it down. We know Sheriff Stines got to the courthouse, walked right past security, no hesitation, headed straight for Judge Mullins' chambers.
Just barged right in.
Seems like it. They had that meeting behind closed doors. Some say there was a huge argument, shouting even. And then, gunshots.
Can't even imagine the fear that must have swept through the courthouse. What gets me is what Stines did right after. He just walked out of chambers, hands up, surrendered. No standoff, no explanation, at least not right away.
And that right there, that's what's got Whitesburg so shaken. This isn't a place where violence like this is, just a normal Tuesday. People there, they look after each other. So for something this awful to happen, it's like their whole world just tilted on its axis.
There's this quote from a local woman, Jessica Sloan. Really stuck with me. She was just at the dollar store, just a normal day when she heard about it. Really puts things into perspective. Tragedy can strike anywhere, anytime, no warning.
And when that happens, when your sense of safety is ripped away like that, especially in a place where everyone knows each other, the impact is immense. It's not just dealing with the loss of Judge Mullins, it's also this sudden distrust, this questioning of everything they thought they knew.
It's like their foundation has been shattered. And we all know those cracks, they spread. This impacts way more than just those directly involved.
Without a doubt, we're seeing that in what people are saying. Patty Wood, the previous judge's widow, she said it best. You couldn't find a better person than Mickey Stines, and then, get this, I don't know what happened. I just cannot believe he just went in and shot him for no reason.
Speaks volumes about the need to make sense of the senseless. We crave reasons, explanations, especially when it's something violent, something that just doesn't make sense.
And when those concrete answers are missing, that's when speculation takes over. Our sources say social media has been buzzing with theories, rumors flying around. It's understandable given what happened, but it also shows how crucial it is to stick to verified information, especially after a tragedy like this.
It's a tough lesson, but a necessary one. When grief and uncertainty take over, it's easy to get swept up in searching for answers. But we got to approach these situations with a critical eye, rely on facts and evidence, not just speculation and what people are saying on the street corner. It's easy to get caught up in the speculation, the whys and hows of such a tragedy. But what really struck me, reading through these accounts, is the tangible impact this event has had on the daily lives of those living in Whitesburg.
It's a harsh reminder that even amidst chaos and grief, life in many ways has to go on. And for the people of Whitesburg, that means facing the very real consequences of this tragedy.
The courthouse, the very heart of their civic life, closed indefinitely. Property tax bills potentially delayed. These might seem like minor inconveniences compared to the loss of life, but they highlight how this event has disrupted the rhythm of their community.
And those disruptions can have lasting effects. Imagine the anxiety of not knowing when or if the courthouse will reopen, the uncertainty surrounding something as fundamental as property taxes. It creates a sense of instability, of unease, that can linger long after the initial shock has worn off.
And then there's the impact on the legal system itself. Sheriff Stines is facing a murder charge, a potential death penalty case. This isn't just a local tragedy, it's become a national news story, drawing attention from all corners.
Which can be a double-edged sword for a community like Whitesburg. On the one hand, it ensures that the case remains in the public eye, that justice will be served, but it also brings with it the glare of the media spotlight, which can feel intrusive and exploitative, especially for those directly impacted by this tragedy.
It's a lot to process, both for the residents of Whitesburg and for us, trying to make sense of it all from the outside. But if there's one thing I keep coming back to, it's the idea that this tragedy, as devastating as it is, also presents an opportunity for reflection and growth.
I couldn't agree more. We can't ignore the larger issues this event brings to light. The epidemic of gun violence plaguing our nation, the immense pressure faced by law enforcement officers, the urgent need for increased mental health resources, especially in rural communities. These are complex, systemic problems that demand our attention.
And perhaps by confronting these uncomfortable truths, by engaging in thoughtful dialogue and taking meaningful action, we can honor the memory of Judge Mullins and work towards preventing similar tragedies from happening in the future.
Because ultimately, that's the hope, isn't it? That even in the darkest of times, we can find the strength and the resolve to create a safer, more just, and more compassionate world.
It's a challenging journey, no doubt. But as we've seen in this deep dive, it's often in confronting those challenges, in wrestling with the difficult questions, that we find the most profound insights.
So let this tragedy serve as a reminder that behind the headlines, behind the statistics, are real people, real lives, forever changed. Their stories, their struggles deserve our attention, our empathy, and our commitment to creating a better future.
And with that, we come to the end of another deep dive. Remember, knowledge is just the first step. It's up to each of us to take what we've learned and turn it into meaningful action. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged.